I don't know if you guys have heard about the L3 pipeline, but I'm just going to start by telling you guys a little bit about it. This company called Enbridge is based in Calgary, Alberta in Canada, and they're building an oil pipeline running southeast from Canada's tar sands region to Lake Superior's western tip near the Minnesota-Wisconsin border. There's already a pipeline that exists, but it's old, so they want to build another route instead. So it's, like I said, it's going to replace the Enbridge's current Line 3 with a larger line along a different route. And Johnny, you can go ahead and put the picture of the pipeline so people know what to look at. Because
there it is.
It's pretty massive, and you can see that there's rivers and water that would be easily contaminated. And this isn't new. I mean, we've seen the Keystone Pipeline, the Dakota Access Pipeline. We've talked about the gas leak with in North Carolina that Robbie Yeager has been covering exhaustively.
Colonial.
Colonial.
What a name.
So there's so many, right? So one documentary, I would say documentary maker and also journalist, Stephen Gute, has actually been over there talking and interviewing with some of the protesters and having just really awesome footage. I was looking at it the other day. Steve, thank you for coming on. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks. And Johnny, I just wanted us to go to click on his Facebook video and watch like the first 2 minutes of some of the footage he had, because it's really impactful. It's an 8-minute long video. You guys should check it out, but let's just watch the first couple of minutes and then we'll get right into it.
When this is all over, you won't be able to drink the money Enbridge pays you to destroy our land. You won't be able to eat it. You won't be able to send your kids to a college when they have no food or water in their stomachs. There will be no future without this river. There will be no future without this land. When you have polluted it all, what will you do? Do you think Enbridge will save you? You have a false sense of ownership. We have no right to be taking the water from these rivers and these waters. We belong to this land. We're fighting for you and your future generations, but you're so misguided. You're so misguided by the capitalistic systems that are put in place for you to get a paycheck and put that above all else.
Yeah, and then they start, pushing each other, or well, they start moving back, and they stand their ground pretty well. I saw that. Like it was really nice to watch the whole thing. So Steve, what is Line 3 project in your own words, and why are they building it?
All right, so the Line 3 pipeline is a tar sand dilbit pipeline that is going to be built basically as a shortcut for Enbridge to go through the Great Lakes to connect with the Alberta tar sands up north with their refineries in Sarnia. And one of the misconceptions about this pipeline and the way it's been labeled is that it's a replacement line. It is not an oil pipeline. It is a tar sand dilbit pipeline. And the distinction is profound and needs to be made because, you know, a lot of people, even core activists here, are referring to it as an oil pipeline. And that's really what the industry wants. So tar sand dilbit is a much different beast, especially when you move it several hundred miles, thousands of miles in this case. So moving traditional crude oil and natural gas or chemicals obviously is problematic, but the real problem with dilbit is that it has the consistency of peanut butter. And so moving it through a pipe long distances, the word tar sands, I mean, it means that there's sand inside the pipe. And so basically when you move that at high pressure, the friction on the interior of the pipe is enormous. And so it has the effect of sandpaper on the inside of the pipe. So it's a much different beast than the original Line 3 pipeline, which was also problematic. But Enbridge's safety record is arguably the worst in the industry. They've had over 800 spills in the last 15 years and are responsible for the two largest inland oil spills in American history. Number one being the first Line 3 pipeline in 1991, spilled 1.7 million gallons of oil in the Grand Rapids, Minnesota area. And then the number two largest inland oil spill being the Line 6B incident in 2010. And with Line 6B, that was a dilbit tar sand pipeline. And so the devastation that occurred as a result of that incident was much worse than any other pipeline rupture I've covered. And in the process, Enbridge was given Michigan taxpayer money to organize the cleanup and cut corners and intimidated the community who was sick and poisoned. And ultimately, the Kalamazoo River was destroyed and remains completely unsafe. You can't fish it, you can't swim in it. And Enbridge has mounted a massive cover-up for years. And a lot of the people who have been poisoned in the process have had to flee the area. So what an incident with Line 3 could look like would resemble more of the Kalamazoo dilbit spill in 2010. And so I think the Great Lakes are ultimately, you know, one of America's greatest assets. It's not a resource, it is the source of life. And, you know, to jeopardize 20 to, you know, some odd percent of the world's fresh water is just insanity, and all for a foreign company just so they can take a shortcut to the refineries. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's supported in a bipartisan fashion. So, you know, the fact that this was originally approved by Trump and is now perpetuated by Biden, just, you know, like you have all, you know, talked about earlier in the show, it's just, you know, the system continually working to destroy the environment and push, you know, the same kind of colonialism that the Ojibwe people have faced for hundreds of years.
Am I understanding you right when you're saying that this particular pipeline has like a sandpaper mechanism which makes it for like easier for leaks? Is that what you're implying?
Yes, exactly. So it's not like traditional crude oil that's, you know, ultimately not going to cause a lot of friction on the inside of the pipe. And so a lot of people argue that's the safer way to move the substance. But with tar sands, it's different. Tar sand is, like I said, it has the consistency of peanut butter. So it's incredibly viscous, and there's this, it's inherently unsafe to move. And it makes no sense to do this thousands of miles across 200 water crossings for just Line 3. And the real problematic aspect of this is it's not just a Minnesota issue here. Line 3 ultimately is a Minnesota pipeline, but it connects with their infrastructure with the Line 5 pipeline, which then moves all of the material across Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, through the Mackinac Strait, and then over into Sarnia. So this affects the entire Great Lakes region. And, you know, when a spill occurs, not if, it's going to be nearly impossible to clean up. The Army Corps has already stated that if something happened in the winter, there'd be pretty much nothing that they can do about it.
Wow. I think I read that they have completed most of it, right? How much do they have left so far?
Well, we can only really speculate, but Enbridge and the state of Minnesota has pledged to complete the pipeline by the fourth fiscal quarter of this year. And so we've spent the past month and a half basically scoping out the pipeline route and looking at the construction, and they are building this thing faster than any other pipeline I've ever seen. And I've covered a lot of pipeline construction at this point, unfortunately. But literally they're working around the clock, and I've never seen this many crews for one pipeline. They're drilling all over the state of Minnesota. And so they've already completed most of the pipeline and put it in the ground in the northwestern part of the state. And then areas like Bagley down to Park Rapids, the pipe is being buried there. So realistically, the only area they really need to finish is going to be the stretch kind of just west of Duluth. And so that's kind of where a lot of the direct action has been occurring. So even this morning, I think something like 20 people were arrested locking down somewhere outside of the Duluth area. And I think it was Camp McGeezy that was performing that direct action. So I'd say probably, about a week ago, they estimated about 80% of the pipelines finished. I'd say a little bit more than that, but yeah, we only have a couple weeks left until this is in the ground. So I keep telling everyone who's involved with Standing Rock or has any regard of environmental ethos, like this is the time to get involved, now. Like it should have been weeks ago, but there's some good people here on the front lines. The numbers aren't insanely high, but there's been some really good actions the past week, and I'm starting to notice that there's more consciousness on a national level starting to occur. And finally, people are having a conversation about Line 3 and why it could be such a disaster.
Who are the water protectors and the hashtag Stop Line 3 movement soldiers that are fighting back against the oil company?
Well, it's pretty much an indigenous-led movement here. And originally there was kind of one core camp that was protesting Line 3, but there's been, kind of a schisming that happened. And so people have been handling things in a more autonomous way. So different camps have emerged and started. So there's a few different kind of key figureheads. Winona LaDuke, who ran for vice president with Nader in 2000 and is, kind of one of the quintessential indigenous environmental leaders in this country right now. She's with Honor the Earth and has a camp. Then there's Red Lake Treaty Camp that's run by So those have been kind of the core entities. There was also the Firelight Camp that was over by the Mississippi headwaters in Itasca, but they shut down about 2 weeks ago, and now they're currently walking to the Capitol to go perform an occupation starting on the 25th. So we're going to be heading over there in a couple days and going to be documenting the occupation. And
where's the Capitol at?
In St. Paul.
Gotcha.
St. Paul, Minnesota. Yeah. So tell us about the legal battle too, because there was a tribal lawsuit against the pipeline, but I think it's running into a tough time.
Yeah, there's been multiple lawsuits against the flawed permitting process here with Line 3. Enbridge has basically just owned and operated the courts and politicians here in the Great Lakes area for some time, not just Minnesota, but also Wisconsin and Michigan as well. And so, realistically, they jammed this permitting process through very quickly. And, now regulators are starting to say, oh, this looks like there might be some red flags here. So I don't hold a lot of hope in the state and the regulators to do the right things. They're already bought and paid for, but, kind of every avenue that we have that we can try and fight the pipeline, and the legal front is a big one. So it can stop battles, but ultimately the deck is stacked in favor of the industry. But in particular, I think the lawsuit that you're talking about is the lawsuit that was filed by the Fond du Lac tribe. Mm-hmm. And the Fond du Lac tribe was the tribe that allowed for the pipeline to run through their land. And ultimately, it really wasn't even the tribe that made that decision. It was the former chairman. So now the current chairman is saying, wait a minute, that was a corrupt deal, and the tribe does not approve of Enbridge coming through these lands. But the Minnesota courts have superseded that decision and said that no, the previous ruling and the deal made with the former leadership of the Fond du Lac tribe stands. And so another aspect of the permitting process here that's very fishy is, this pipeline ultimately, it's an international pipeline, number one, but number two, it's not just a Minnesota state project. So since it goes and connects with Line 5, realistically, the permitting process should have also been overseen by FERC, the national permitting board that needs to approve pipelines. And I think that's why Joe Biden ultimately made the Keystone XL pipeline a sacrificial lamb to prove that he's a quote unquote environmentalist. Yeah, right. But, you know, that was basically, they could say that, you know, that project, you know, they knew they were never going to be able to get it approved. And it had been, you know, a legal battle for, you know, what, 15 years now, maybe even more than that. And so they knew that that was never going to happen. But line 3 is a little different story. All they need to do is railroad it through the Michigan or the Minnesota system and the Michigan system. They don't need to, you know, do an interstate project and have to worry about federal oversight. So a lot of these aspects are very problematic. And, you know, I really hope that people that are working in the legal front have some success in that regard. But like I said, like when it comes to working within the system, yeah, I just, I'll believe it when I see it kind of thing.
Yeah.
I hear you. Well, many people haven't heard about this pipeline being built. And you interviewed a young woman who said that she was censored online for speaking up about it. What are the specific money interests? And is this only a U.S. Canada thing, or is there outside money coming in?
Oh, I mean, it's just the rabbit hole goes deep with this one, Pasta. It's
we like rabbit holes,
know where to
Steve.
start.
Take
I
us
do like
down here.
rabbit
Be our
holes,
tour
and
guide.
That's why we're in good company here, and why me and Fiorella have been friends for so long. That and we seem to get arrested in the same places. But yeah, no, this project is most definitely international, and so it really doesn't serve a lot of American purposes. I mean, this is only going to create a few temporary jobs, and all those are going to be over in a couple weeks. So realistically, the whole, you know, employment propaganda and the energy independence, keep us out of the Middle East aspects is pretty ridiculous the minute you start to actually do a little bit of research. You know, this pipeline, none of the fuel that's going to be refined is even going to be used in America. And the issue with that is because tar sands are inherently very dirty, and the industry is on the verge of collapsing right now. For a long time, people thought that, you know, shale was going to be what, you know, ultimately made America and Canada the energy leaders of the world. But it's basically just like a continuation of coal, but even dirtier. And so all of the fuel, once the dilbit goes through the pipeline, will then be processed into something called pet coke. And the pet coke will be then sold almost exclusively on the international market, not entirely exclusively. And it will only be sold to countries with lower environmental standards. So it's appearing that China is going to be the prime beneficiary of most of the pet coke. And, you know, that gets into a lot of conspiracies of who is actually dictating this censorship campaign that's currently going on. But it's definitely not like the days of Standing Rock where we post a video and 500,000 people would watch it. Now we need to, you know, claw our way through the algorithm to just try and make sure, like, you know, 1,000 to 10,000 people watch it. And luckily through, you know, really voracious word of mouth campaign and trying to do it old school and message videos to, you know, friends and allies individually, it's been very difficult. Like anything associated with line 3 just gets buried in the algorithm. And, you know, who is ultimately dictating that? But as you all know, with your show, I'm sure you've been throttled in a big way since, you know, well, past 4 years, but in particular since January 6th. So they've used the Capitol as an excuse to basically cut down on any dissent against the system, not just for right wingers, but it's also especially people who are more anarchist minded are really getting thrown under the bus right now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. An article by Slate states that the police force in Minnesota were paid $750,000 to police like about 3 protesters, and that they recently arrested elder women, 7 of them. Have the altercations with police gotten worse? I only saw a little snippet of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, realistically, the 2 things you're referencing happened about 2 months ago, the Shell 7, and that was Winona LaDuke and a few other Native leaders. But I think as of today, there's been over 800 people that have been arrested, which is more than the entire campaign during the Dakota Access Pipeline construction in Standing Rock. So it's a different kind of policing here, though. It's not like what happened with DAPL when, you know, people were getting shot at by the military and whatnot. I think they realized that was like ultimately optics that will stop this pipeline. And so they're trying to handle the policing a little bit differently here. And so now I think infiltration, provocateurs, trying to create infighting within the camps. A lot of that is kind of the more, preferred method, kind of COINTELPRO subversive measures.
We were just talking about this today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, this is
With
why we're
Cynthia
friends.
McKinney. That's what they do. They
um,
infiltrate.
It's more like being in a spy movie out here than like a traditional war zone, but
Wow.
it's been pretty intense. And like there was one point where we almost got run off the road by a sheriff, and there's been multiple direct actions where several people have been arrested, and in the past week to 2 weeks, people have been locking down a lot more. So there's been mass arrests, and I would wager that the next 2 weeks things are really going to ramp up around here, especially if people start paying attention. But everyone here on the front lines has been doing this work for months, years in some cases. And so it's time for the general public to get involved. And, you don't need to be here in Minnesota to organize an action against Enbridge. There were I think 40 cities that held solidarity actions in the past week and protested in front of banks and called on divestment from Enbridge and Line 3. So realistically, I think, we still have time to stop this. And it's just a matter of urgency. There's so many other things like the recall election in California that people are paying attention to. And, of course, COVID is, raging worse than ever. But that doesn't mean we should go back to sleep again. And in terms of the Great Lakes, I think, that's pretty much the most important aspect of just our economy. If the Great Lakes goes, we won't have a country anymore. We're like some Mad Max bullshit.
Oh, yeah. I'm really concerned now, too. You say that many arrests have already been taken. Have any charges been brought? Because we had a situation just recently, right? We had a water protector. They smacked the domestic terrorist label on her, right? And this is why we tell the left, hey, guys, they're going to come, they're going to use it against us, too. She got 8 years. They doubled her sentence because of the domestic terrorist label. Have you heard of any of the 800 arrests? Have they been getting charged as a domestic terrorist yet?
I haven't heard about any Homeland Security charges yet or domestic terrorism charges, but I haven't been quite as involved in that legal front. I can tell you that there's been multiple felony trespass in the past week, though, and I'm sure they're going to try and, up some of the charges. I know one of my friends, his trial just got deferred from a couple weeks ago to October, and they're basically trying to just mount all the evidence possible and then throw stricter charges against them. So they even did, I think, talk about being potentially charged for some kind of Homeland Security violations.
Jeez.
And it's something that, even we face as journalists now.
Yeah.
In a lot of, I think in 21 states now, you can go to jail for as much as 70 years for just covering an oil and gas infrastructure protest. Luckily, Minnesota is not one of those 21 states, but Wisconsin is. And, it makes you wonder why Tony Evers, the Democratic governor, was so on board with, this draconian law that favors the fossil fuel industry.
Yep.
And I mean, they've simultaneously made deals with the Chinese company Foxconn and have opened up a lot of their mining regulations for industry to come in, especially foreign industry. So, yeah, it's a weird time right now to be a water protector or a journalist or just someone who's on the front lines because, you could really face some severe draconian ramifications for speaking your mind and doing the right thing.
There's so much going on too with Julian Assange. It's just if that happens, forget it.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can be done? What are some resources you advocate for people to go to? And what can people do to really help bring this story to the forefront? I've seen very little about it. My sister told me about it actually the first on TikTok. There were little videos going around TikTok, and that's all I've seen. I haven't really seen that much attention paid to it. So what can we do?
Yeah, aside from a smattering of just a few articles here and there that might pop up in the back of the New York Times or whatnot, or Slate, there really has been a media blackout here kind of in the early days of Standing Rock. And so there's a small group of independent media out here, but we've been working around the clock to try and release as much content as we can and, just break the algorithm and, try and create a larger national conversation. But, realistically, we just need everyone to speak out against this. Go live, talk about it, have tough conversations with your friends and family. And, take all avenues possible. You know, a lot of people are advocating writing your congressional representatives. I mean, give it a try, you know, but, you know, the only thing that's really going to stop this is people really giving their entire heart and being into this. And there's only a couple to 3 weeks left. So I'd say just dedicate yourself for the next 2 to 3 weeks. If you really care about the water, if you really care about tribal sovereignty rights, you know, if you really care about future generations, and if you care about having a system that's for the people and not for a foreign company to like just take a shortcut to save a few bucks, I mean, it's time to get involved. And I think the only thing that is really going to stop this, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, is if regular centrist Democrats get off their ass and start to question their own people. Because the hypocrisy that these, you know, Democrats are, you know, brandishing right now, claiming to care about climate change every other tweet, and then supporting Enbridge to build a tar sand pipeline. I mean, this tar sand pipeline alone, the energy equivalent carbon wise will be the same as building 50 new coal fired plants. I mean, that's absurd. Like, I don't know how people can, you know, go through these mental gymnastics to justify that these people are environmentalists. So I think that hypocrisy and the concern of them losing their positions in 3 years to some kind of Republicans seems to be terrifying to them.
Yeah.
So if you want to, like, you know, not be judged by, you know, the bullshit hypocrisy in 3 years, you know, it's time for the Democrats to stop line 3 and to get involved and to not be afraid to question your own leadership. You know, I think that's the biggest problem, is they're scared to point out the flaws of their own. And I've had multiple Democrats write me and tell me to stop the coverage of line 3 because it could get a Republican elected in 3 years. I mean, that's some insane cult shit that I'm not going to tolerate.
Yeah.
So it's time for people to, like, you know, put their mouth, you know, their mind where their money is, and, you know, just instead of just talking the talk, walk the walk.
Yeah.
Get involved, stop line 3 now by whatever means necessary. Even if you just go and hold a sign in front of your local Wells Fargo and stand out there and live stream it for a few minutes and say, stop line 3, and convince other people to do it. I bet you that could create a wave of action that, you know, they might have to pay attention to. But realistically, I think things could heat up here at the Capitol on the 25th. And depending on what goes down there with the police, and if the occupation's allowed to stay, or if it's violently broken up before it can begin, that could create some optics that could actually make people care about stopping the pipeline.
Steve, tell us where we can find your work, where people can go check out some more of your footage.
So we have been producing a series about water called Confluence all of the downstream consequences to our society.
Steve, can you start over? You got cut off right in the very beginning.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So yeah, we've been producing a film series called Confluence for about 7 years. And it originally started as a project about the Missouri River, but has grown and grown and grown by investigating downstream consequences. So we're using water as a reflective lens to analyze all sorts of the issues that our society faces, whether it be political, environmental, social justice causes, et cetera. And so we've been to 48 states in the past 7 years, and we've tried to put out all the micro content that we can. But simultaneously, we're working on a more long-winded series of hour-long episodes that will cover the whole country and investigate all of America's watershed. And so it's called Confluence Documentary. You can find it on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're not on TikTok yet. Sorry about that, but we'll be there soon. We need to be there for the kids. But
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, check that out. And then I also post on my personal page because the Confluence documentary site has been throttled so hard and probably was labeled a fake news site after Standing Rock. So we've had to do whatever to, like, just mass saturate releasing content. And, you know, I thank you guys for having me on the show and trying to stop line 3. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, we see the hotel lights behind you. You're out there in the field doing the hard work, brother. We do appreciate that, man. You know, real journalism right here, Stephen. Thank you so much, everybody. Go check out his stuff, and let's stop line 3. Thank you.
All right, see y'all back in LA.
You got it, Stephen.
See ya.
Bye.
Awesome guest.
Yeah.